Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on technology adoption, making decisions from the data and knowing when to pivot. I'd like to thank our sponsors and recognize that this panel is supported by ACOA, EDC, and BDC. My name is Beth Girard, and I'm the Director of Strategy, Research, and Marketing here at Nova Scotia Business Inc. Today, we're going to discuss a range of supports available to help you develop and implement your own digital strategies. By adopting the right technology, we know that you can leverage the opportunities created in this once-in-a-century moment that we heard from our keynote, Azim, this morning. I'm pleased to be joined by my knowledgeable colleagues who are ready to share the work that their organizations do to support businesses in our region. Based on client data over the past few years, our organizations have pivoted to create and provide companies with programs and services to support their digital adoption needs. We'll talk about some of those today, and at the end of our panel, you'll be able to find our panelists' resources and recommendations in their trade show booths. So, okay, let's meet our panelists. We are joined by Joe Cashin. Maybe you can just raise your hand, Joe. Joe is the Director of Enterprise Development for the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, or fondly known as ACOA. Joe works with ACOA to create opportunities for economic growth in the region, and he's joining us from Cape Breton today, where he says the snow has barely started, so he's not going to have any tough commute today. Welcome, Joe. Next up, we have Ed Steeves. As Export Development Canada's Regional Vice President for the Atlantic region, Ed has more than 20 years of experience in the financial services sector and brings a wide variety of skills from a diverse financial background, which includes Canadian corporate and commercial banking, structured finance, and project financing. Thanks for joining us today, Ed. And finally, I see that Adam has a bit of a connectivity issue, but I'm going to introduce him anyway because I'm confident that technology is going to work for us and he will be back. So Adam Nalepa is a senior client partner with Business Development Bank of Canada's advisory services. At BDC, Adam is part of a multiple disciplinary team of industry experts that aligns clients' business objectives with impactful, results-driven advice. Welcome, Adam. To get our discussion started, we're going to focus on technology adoption and specifically what we're seeing from companies in Atlantic Canada. We'll talk about how the COVID-19 pandemic has and continues to push us into a digital business reality, but also what businesses can do to keep up and some of the supports that are available to help. I'm going to kick things off by talking a little bit about NSBI's experience with clients over the past couple of years since COVID-19 started to impact us. It became clear pretty early in the pandemic when travel restrictions were put into place that a digital strategy and an online presence were going to be key for many businesses in our province to be able to maintain their sales. Through the support of ACOA, and working with our Crown Corporation partners, NSBI worked to launch a digital adoption program pilot 2 months after restrictions came into place. This program helped companies develop a digital strategy and adopt the technology they needed to pivot and scale up their businesses online. But something else interesting happened too. We suspected that by helping companies develop their online presence and enter e-commerce, that it would also perhaps lead to them selling their products and services outside of Nova Scotia if they hadn't before, or it would help them export. And that is what we saw happen. More than half of the companies that NSBI worked with last year to become first-time exporters were companies that were participants of our digital adoption program. And that's a lot higher percentage than our other programs. So our hunch was correct. We've also recognized that it's important to continue to support businesses on their digital technology journey. So we've added a digital adoption stream into our export development program to make sure that we're able to offer these resources to businesses going forward. But obviously, there was life before the pandemic, and even before COVID-19 began, we saw some important trends in digital adoption in Atlantic Canada. NSBI worked with the Atlantic Provinces Economic Council, or APEC, to dig into it a bit further. And APEC found that digital adoption rates in Canada were lower compared to innovative economies like the US, but that adoption rates in Atlantic Canada even trailed the Canadian average. I'm going to turn it over to Adam. Adam, I'm glad you're back with us. Your connectivity seems good there. So I'm going to ask you if you could talk a little bit more about some additional context and set the stage for our audience.
Great. Oh, thanks a lot, Beth. And you're right. All that data is true. And I think, taking that a step further, looking at more complex digital adoption processes like robotics. Canada has about 140 robotics or robots or any automated processes per 10,000 employees within Canada. And if you benchmark us versus the US, they have about 200. And if you go even greater, you see Korea with, I think, 500 robots per 10,000 employees. And so we're seeing Canada being a laggard with respect to digital adoption and even within the manufacturing and other areas. And so when you boil that down to looking at Canada, Atlantic Canadians are the lowest to adopt technology within Canada. And so our data shows that from a digital adoption perspective, roughly 50% of Atlantic Canadians consider their organization digitally advanced. When you're looking at other provinces, Quebec is the highest at 26%. And digitally advanced means that there's a leadership team that's supporting the initiatives. They have some process in place that evaluates technology and the capital deployment of technology as well. And so we're seeing about Atlantic Canadian operations, about half of that. And so when we're looking at manufacturing companies like within the Industry 4.0 space, and so that could be big data, that could be sensors of internet things, et cetera. Atlantic Canadian organizations, again, are the laggards within that. And so about 32% of businesses in Atlantic have taken a step to adopt some form of technology. And then if you look at other provinces, they're about 50% at this point. So I think it's a great opportunity for NSBI, ACOA, and EDC and other provincial and federal support mechanisms to help with the initiative of digital adoption. And so a really interesting announcement happened with Minister Ng today was the Canadian Digital Adoption Program, which Natasha Hudson just actually put a link in the message box there to it. And essentially, the federal government recognized that Canada is lagging with digital adoption, and they wanted to do something about it. And so this program is a multi-billion-dollar, multi-year program that's going to support small to mid-sized organizations to allow them to adopt technology, specifically through a digital strategy and a strategic plan specific to digital adoption. And so this program that is sponsored by ISED will be sponsoring businesses and covering businesses to create a digital adoption plan up to $15,000 of grant money, so free money to pay an advisory firm to support going through a plan and understanding their business of where to adopt technology. BDC is an exclusive partner on the financing arm, and so if a business goes through the digital plan, there is up to $100,000 of interest-free loan that will be granted to organizations to execute on the findings of that digital plan. BDC Advisory Services also is a preferred partner on the advisory piece. So we'll actually be meeting with businesses and creating those digital plans for these organizations. So I think, Beth, to answer your points there, I think that Canada has recognized that we are lagging within the digital adoption space, and they're doing something about it. And through the CDAP program, I think it's a great initiative that will give access to a lot of businesses to actually have access to those digital plans that they didn't have before with this funding.
That's great. Thank you, Adam. I will say that as soon as that was announced, it was picked up by this session today pretty quickly, and it showed up in the chats of the sessions that were going on at the time. I'll also put in a shameless plug and say that we were also pleased this morning to have our Minister of Economic Development, Susan Corkum-Greek, announced that the Innovation Rebate Program administered by NSBI is becoming a permanent program. And we can also fund businesses through that program to adopt technology and invest in innovative projects. So we're definitely on the right track. And I'm not picking favorites, but Adam, I'm going to ask you another question. And maybe if you could tell us what you would say to a business that was hesitant to invest in technology.
Yeah, and I think that's probably very common. Technology can be overwhelming. A lot of businesses don't know where to start. They don't know who to pick as a vendor to support them. And so I think the timing now, especially with this announcement, I think it's the right time to invest in technology. Obviously, COVID and the pandemic has accelerated that. We saw at the start of the pandemic, 10 years of e-commerce growth happened in 90 days. So we're seeing businesses adopt technology. It's starting to become obviously more familiar to these businesses. And we know, the data shows that if you use technology and adopt it to sell more, you're going to be more likely to have higher profitability and be more innovative and specifically export. So you're going to grow as an organization as a whole. And so I think, where do you start? I think number one, you need to understand your business and why you're actually wanting technology. And it all starts with the business case. Does your business objectives align with technology? Because we work with a lot of organizations that want technology, and you have to step back and look at why do you want that information? If it's an automated process, why are you automating that process? What does that workflow look like? And so I think right now it is the right time to do it. I think you just need to understand the business case of why you're looking at those projects. And a lot of it too, what we're seeing is the customer. The customer is really dictating how businesses operate today and the customer journey. And so understanding your customer and the buying behavior is becoming a huge emphasis on these organizations. And so e-commerce is becoming more important, and giving access to your product or your solution or your service easier to allow clients or customers to do business with you more so. So I think technology used to be a competitive advantage to businesses, and now it's not. Now it's the norm, and it's kind of almost mandatory to have and to invest in it, and to add that to obviously your planning discussions each year.
Perfect. Some great points. Thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to Joe Cashin from ACOA, the ACOA perspective. Joe, we know that many businesses have struggled over the past couple of years, and they need to make some tough decisions about how and where to invest. So I'm going to ask you the same question, and maybe you could tell us what you would say to a business that was hesitant to invest in technology.
Okay, thanks, Beth. I would say that your firm will most likely get left behind. Investments in technology is critical for businesses today to remain competitive, to attract investment, and to attract skilled labor. Automation and digitization is being referred to the next industrial revolution, 4.0. Restrictions brought on by the pandemic have helped accelerate the need for technology, with remote working conditions and a noticeable expansion of e-commerce. Businesses need a digital strategy. You need a web presence. You need to be able to buy and sell online. You need to be able to communicate to both customers and your staff online. I would encourage the business to educate themselves on the benefits of investing in technology. I would also suggest that they take advantage of the government supports that are available. I would encourage them to contact their local ACOA office and have a discussion with an account manager. And also, to the companies registered today, I suggest you attend Workshop D at 3:20 p.m., The Cost of Missing the Mark, How Inconsistency Impacts the Bottom Line, conducted by Gary Cox, a senior associate at Barrington Consulting, and 2 ACOA account managers, Peter Wright and Mark Vanderweel.
Thank you, Joe. And I know your colleagues are going to appreciate the plug for their workshop, so that's great. Let's hear from you, Ed, at EDC next. It would be great if you could share advice that you have for companies as they explore technology for their business.
Great. Thank you, Beth. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's been a great session so far this morning. So kudos to NSBI for running a great show today. Like my other colleagues, I truly believe that the digital adoption is critical to success for any company in all industries across Nova Scotia and indeed Atlantic Canada. And your comments earlier about the export component being a critical factor is very apparent from my lens. So EDC deals with about 500 companies here in Atlantic Canada, and during the pandemic, I'd be hard pressed to say that not one of them hasn't had to deal with some form of adoption of new technology. And we see it right across the platform, whether it's an e-commerce platform trying to find new markets and ways to access new buyers, whether it's they're moving their supply chains or trying to create more efficient and effective supply channels, or whether they're trying to move upscale and moving from a commodity-based product or service to a more high-end value-add process. They're all using this technology. And as far as some advice that I would see, and from our perspective, is the speed of technology and innovation these days, it can be both very intimidating and very tempting, actually, to jump straight into a new system that could potentially revolutionize your business. Every day we're seeing new platforms come along, and it may seem like the smartest bet is to go full steam ahead into a brand new endeavor and a new wave of tech-powered business. But instead of running blindly into this full system-wide upgrade, we think business owners should focus on making technology adoption more of a step-by-step evolution that starts with a small change and then builds from there. This requires a very detailed and plan and roadmap to follow. And we think you should consider sort of looking at some pilot stages to start off with, initial test rollouts, and then move to a more company-wide implementation. And this needs to be work that's built in as part of your overall strategy, not just part of a once and done technical experiment. This is part of your entire business strategy that needs to be looked at.
Great point. Thank you. Adam, I might go quickly back to you. Did you have a client example that you might be able to share with us, a company that came to you looking for help with adopting technology?
Absolutely. And this is kind of Nathan just in the chat window asked about the food industry. So I actually have an example of food and beverage industry specifically. Client came to us. They were hacked, and so that's something that we're seeing all the time now. About one in 5 companies are seeing a breach of their data, whether it's vendor or personal corporate data. So they came to us, number one, because of that, and didn't know what to do. And we can support on the cybersecurity aspect, but really it boiled down to their digital plan as a whole and how they were going to scale their organization. And they had a lot of silos when it came to communication and data. There was no visibility within the organization, so they really didn't understand, profitability or understood, what production levels look like from a day-to-day basis. And so what we did was we stepped back, and again, going to my first comment with the question that you had, it was we needed to align their business objectives to their technology initiatives. And so we step back, we look at what they needed to do and prioritize that. And what Ed just mentioned, I truly believe, is taking small projects and implementing them. That, I think with that muscle, corporate muscle, then you get that change management aspect, you get momentum, and there's a lot of positive things that happen when you look at those small projects and wins. And anytime a business takes on technology, it's a change management exercise at the end of the day. And you need to have your employees on board. And so you need to communicate. You need to actually have these meetings and the leadership aligned to it. And so going back to my example of the food and beverage company, they really didn't have a clear understanding of why they needed to adopt technology. They had to, because of their competition. And so for us, we needed to align, again, business objectives and why they were doing it. And so we put out a clear roadmap, and then we also prioritized what they needed to do, whether it was obviously clearing up from a cybersecurity perspective, aligning their e-commerce strategy, internally looking at their silos of data, and cleaning that information up so that they can actually have visibility into their business, and all along, obviously formalizing, which is a big part, the budget. Technology, it's easy to spend a lot of money on technology, and so we were trying to prioritize understanding, where they are from a financial health perspective, what they can cover, this year, next year, and the following years. Because when you add technology, businesses become more complex, and you also need other support mechanisms within. So we were able to give them a clear, cohesive plan on how to adopt the technology, what steps to take, and ultimately kind of what that ROI would look like. Because again, you don't want to do something just to do something. You need to have a business case and a return on your investment at the end of the day.
Excellent, thank you. Joe, I might go back to you. We had talked earlier in the week about a seafood processing example that you had. Maybe you'd like to talk to everybody about that.
Sure. Seafood processing sector provides an excellent example where increased levels of automation are critical for increase in productivity and production. And seafood is one of our main exports out of Nova Scotia today. So many of our processors are located in rural areas of the province, and they're typically the biggest employer in those areas and critical to community prosperity. So access to production workers is more and more challenged due to the seasonality of that business and due to the aging demographic and out-migration of young people to more urban areas of the province. So many of these businesses counted on temporary foreign workers during COVID, which was quite a challenge. So in order for these companies to survive, they must replace problematic human tasks with automated processes. So an example, ACOA provided funding, a portion of the funding required by this lobster processor to purchase automated meat extraction equipment to get at the lobster knuckles, claws, and legs. So this automation, it not only provided an increase in production capacity by removing the manual task, but it also added more output volume that led to a new value-added product suitable for retail market export. So this company, they've enjoyed success in the past, and they will in the future because they've embraced concepts of continuous improvements and the need to acquire automation, especially with the help lessen the impacts of the changing labor availability.
Thank you. Yes, that's an excellent point. Ed, when we were preparing for the panel, we had talked about the transformation in Canada's agri-food sector and some of the work that EDC is doing. Maybe I'll ask you to share some insight on that.
Sure, no problem, Beth. The government of Canada has identified agri-food as the sector as one of the 8 sectors of the economy that have the most significant opportunities and untapped potential globally, and but requires a lot of focus and a little bit more attention to unlock this opportunity. Now, this could, in our region, this could include the seafood sector, as we talked a bit about, or traditional agriculture, livestock production, or any of the other food processing segments of the economy. And, these sectors have a huge track record of accomplishments in research. They have an exceptional base of companies and entrepreneurs that are very forward thinking. And the quality of the product and the safety track record are driving ongoing favorable positioning in a global market. And this is a huge competitive advantage for us here locally in Atlantic Canada. But the agriculture sector experts obviously believe that technology also has a super important part to play on the ongoing transformation. And there's still work to be done. So we need to develop some additional ag tech tools, some processes, and a government mechanism to be able to verify claims that Canada's food is indeed the safest and most sustainable in the world. And much like we're seeing the wave of machine learning or artificial intelligence or big data analytics affecting other sectors of the economy, agri-food is expected to be one of the next waves of innovation in this broad area of high tech. So EDC has been working with a lot of companies in this sector across the region, companies that are looking to invest in their technology, their automation infrastructure, and actually just to fund their general cash management and working capital requirements of growing their international business profile. And we've been doing this by working with their individual financial institutions, whether it's a Canadian bank, a European bank, or one of the local credit unions. And we provide guarantees to actually support additional credit availability so that companies can make these investments and actually become more competitive globally. And we combine this with our free access to EDC's international trade knowledge and a database of information that's available to all people through our export help platform online. And we're also working to connect Canada's most innovative and export-ready companies to some of the world's largest supply chains. So we have offices in 20 countries around the globe, and we work in conjunction with Global Affairs Canada and our Trade Commissioner Services to make sure that Canadian companies are being introduced to the right people and bringing our technology forward. So those are a couple areas that EDC is trying to move the dial on. And, I would, much the same as Joe, I would suggest, for anybody out there who's interested in learning more, to reach out to one of our colleagues, and we'd be happy to help.
Great. Thank you so much. Our time today has absolutely flown by. I think the overarching message that we heard was that technology adoption is not a project to be completed, but it's a business philosophy that's necessary to stay competitive. So we'll just leave you with maybe that final thought. And I'd like to thank my panelists, Joe, Ed, and Adam. We really appreciate you taking the time. I would encourage everybody to visit the trade show booths to find more information and resources from our panelists today. And I'll just let you know that next up, you have a 5-minute break before we have the second session of the afternoon workshops that Joe put a plug in for. So please do attend. There's still lots of learnings today. And I'll invite everyone to take a bit of a break. Thank you, and we'll see you in 5.
The history dates back to 1912, when Scotian Gold was previously called the United Fruit Companies of Nova Scotia. Originally, it was created as a co-op, and it was felt that in order to compete on the global stage, purchasing power as the collective was top of mind, and any and all advantages were needed to be sought out, and the idea was to bring all the cooperatives together.
This farm has been with Scotian Gold since the late 60s as a member of the co-op. And also, my father was a director of the company, and I'm a director of the company. Years ago, it was all pretty well sight and taste. Most of the apples back then were all red. Now we have an orangey, like Honeycrisp and Sweet Tangle. They're not a real red color.
It is a grower-owned cooperative, so here for the collective good. First and foremost, we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can possibly to get as much out of the fruit and as much value out of the fruit as we can to return as much back to the grower as possible.
We got great science people to help us out, growing and information and marketing, storage. It's a great relationship.
We go out to all the farms and we analyze the fruit as we're getting close to harvest time, so we can decide when it's the perfect time to start at each of the farms and when to stop harvesting at each of the farms, that we'll have the optimum harvest for the different varieties. We have a DA meter that reads the chlorophyll content of the flesh of the apple, and it's a non-destructive test. So when apples are small and young, they have a very high chlorophyll content, and then as they mature, that gets lower and lower, and we can decide when harvest is actually going to happen based on the numbers that we're getting from our machine. So this one's called the F750 Produce Quality Meter, and it measures the dry matter content of the apples as well as the brix content or the sugar content, and that'll help us determine how well the fruit will store. You want a good sugar acid balance, and then I do pressure tests to see how crunchy the apples are, and then we just look at the general color and if there's any insect damage or anything like that.
So much of our investment has been geared towards storing fruit as long as we possibly can and maintaining that good quality consumer experience.
We use dynamic controlled atmosphere storages so we can monitor the breathing, the respiration of the apples as they're sleeping in our chambers, because they breathe just like we breathe. And after a while you can test, can you take a little bit less oxygen? And the apples will say, yeah, okay, nope. So then we stop at that level and we hold them there. Then after a month we'll test them again, and you can just keep lowering the oxygen very gently over the storage period. And that holds them so close to where they were when they were harvested that they taste just like they've been picked off the tree, even if it's 6 months later. You know, if you can go in March or April and buy a local apple that tastes like it was just picked, you're gonna keep coming back and buying more.
We are the main supplier within the Atlantic region. We also ship right across Canada as well. In terms of reach, a good portion of our crop does go to the US. And outside of North America, we have recently started to make some inroads into the South Asian market, and that's a key growth area for us. We're here to provide solutions to our buyers and our retailers, so I think if we're here providing good fruit to the market, then it should work itself back the other way in terms of providing a good return to the growers at the end of the day.